in 2014-15 as an outcome of our facility study in 2013. And one of the charges or one of the directions from the facility study was to conduct a comprehensive boundary study within the district, the first time ever complete comprehensive boundary study. And so many of you, I've seen this evening, were either involved in that facilities process or in the feeder pattern boundary study, which resulted in aligning our feeder patterns to the greatest extent possible at that time and having the board approval of attendance boundaries that could withstand the test of time to the greatest extent possible based on the demographic enrollment projections that we had at that time, and lead us through an engagement process with the community where we were able to go through many different scenarios for those boundaries before taking final recommendations to the board for approval. So many of you, I know, were involved in that process and provided feedback. And one of the things I'd like to say about that process, because it is what we have replicated this time to open up elementary school 48 and middle school 15, as well as other schools in the northwest portion of our district, is that it is the most important thing about this is the community engagement and your feedback in the process. And that one person's feedback or question or comment has been and was just as important as 500 people making comments that are the same. And so to me, that has been the most valuable component of this whole process. And you will see, if you're a focus group member tonight, that your feedback at this time in this boundary planning process, you will see some different scenarios based on the feedback that you provided in the past weeks in this process. We have been, I'm so sorry, I neglected a very important announcement. Thank you. We have with us this evening sign language interpreters, and so if you are in need of sign language interpretation, we encourage you to move down this way so that you're closer in proximity to our sign language interpreters. And then I'm also going to take just a moment so that our Spanish translation can make an introduction.
Buenas noches. Si alguien necesita interpretación al español, por favor acérquese para que le podamos entregar el equipo y así poder escuchar la presentación en español. Gracias.
Thank you. I'm so very sorry. I forgot those important announcements. So back to the background of our comprehensive boundary study. Where we ended when the board approved our attendance boundaries that we are living right now is that we left off with some future considerations or possibilities for boundaries in the future. And that served and is serving as our start for the boundaries for 17-18 for the opening of elementary school 48 and middle school 15. This evening is so important because even if you happen to see a scenario up on the projector that you're happy with and you see that there might be no possible change to your area, I encourage you not to leave. I encourage you to stay and examine all of the boundary scenarios and provide input, because as I said, your input is very valuable to this process, and you bring with you historical knowledge of the area. You bring with you, you have a way of looking at this information in a way that is different from the way that employees may look at it or other families may look at it. So I'm not going to say anything if you get up and walk out. Of course, we will not. But I encourage you, even if it doesn't apply to you, if there are no changes that you see, to encourage you to stay and provide feedback. We are going to have 3 different ways for you to provide feedback throughout this process to this evening, and it'll be a paper survey or a paper questionnaire and a QR code leading you to the same online questionnaire so that you can provide feedback on the concepts that are shown to you this evening and discussed. We also have the Let's Talk on our district website, where you can choose a direct link that will come to our office. It's the attendance boundaries link, and that's a way for you after this evening at any point during the process to send questions, submit questions, comments, concerns, and know that each one of those questions or comments will be reviewed and you will receive a response to your information. It's also a way for us to build an FAQ. If you have questions, we'll be using questions that come in from the community to better communicate out throughout the process to the larger community. So please take advantage of that throughout the process. All of the work that we have done has been guided by Board Policy FC Local, and Scott from DeJong Richter, Scott Leopold, our consultant from DeJong Richter, who's over here, will be walking you through the scenarios this evening, talking to you about the process that has been followed at this point, and he will also be sharing with you some very important components of policy FC local that we're currently revising, because we want to make sure that we include in policy FC local what happens when a new school opens or a boundary changes and kids are moved. When we did this process back in 2014-15, the board signed a resolution. It was very important to our board members that students who were rising from 4th to 5th grade would be able to remain at their campus rather than have to make a transition in that 5th grade year. And the same held true for those students who were moving from 7th to 8th grade. So I just want you to know that if you look online at our policy FC local today, you may see a different policy or a little bit of an additional components of that policy in December, because we are asking the board to consider some recommendations or some recommended changes to that policy. I think I've pretty well covered what I needed to tell you all before I turn this over to Scott. Scott is our consultant, as I mentioned, from DeJong Richter, and he's worked with the district through the comprehensive feeder pattern and boundary alignment in 14-15. He's led the process thus far, and it's amazing to me and to others who have worked with him in this district how very well he knows the ins and outs of our district and the data, and so he will be able to keep you really well informed throughout this presentation this evening. Before I give it to you, Scott, I would like to ask those of you in the audience who have been members of the focus groups in this area this time for these boundaries, could you please stand? These are members of the community who were recommended by principals, who participated in focus groups, who gave of their time, a lot of time. Yes, thank you very much, because they came in a few weeks back and they didn't have one thing to focus on for each school like you're going to be looking at tonight. They had multiple options that they gave feedback around and had some very robust discussions, and so that feedback was used to shape the concepts that you'll see this evening. So thank you very much, and Scott, I'm going to hand it to you.
All right, it's great to be here again. Again, I'm Scott Leopold with DeJong Richter. We're an educational planning firm out of Columbus, Ohio, and all we do is planning. And so this is all I've been doing for the last 12 years of my life. And so this is a passion of mine. I just want to kind of go through a quick overview of the process that we've fulfilled thus far. Is we started by developing a series of options, and our goal for this process this year was to get boundaries established for the schools that are opening up. We did not want to kind of open up that can of worms that is the high school boundaries again, because that would become the focus and then we would never get done. And so our focus for this process is specifically for elementaries 48, 49, 50, 51, and middle school 15. We started by developing an initial set of options that we shared with the focus group. And then we took that feedback to inform these options into some concepts that you're going to see tonight. This is a little different from the process that we ran in 2014, where we had a series of different options that we asked you all to weigh in on. What you're going to see tonight is just basically one concept for elementary schools and one concept for middle schools, and that's what we're looking for your feedback on. This is not a, here it is, hope you like it. We're absolutely looking at your feedback and collecting that information, taking it to the district leadership, the school board, and maybe tweaking it based on that. And so this is not just a presentation of what's going to happen. This is absolutely an open process that we want your feedback on. And again, just from a timeline standpoint, once we get your feedback tonight, we'll come back, may tweak some things some more, and then the board is going to get updates throughout this process, and there will be some action on the boundaries in January 2017. Just a little bit more detail. We broke the district up into 3 different areas that we're going to focus on. Tonight, obviously, we're looking only at elementaries 48 and middle school 15. If you are here and you want to provide feedback on the other areas, like Beth mentioned before, all that information is available online. You can fill out an online survey to provide that feedback. I want to talk just a little bit about policy FC local. Again, this is the policy that the board put in place to kind of give us some guidelines and some parameters to operate within for developing options and attendance boundaries. I don't want to read these verbatim, but I'm just going to kind of go over these overall purposes here. We like to maintain the neighborhood concept, prevent and eliminate overcrowding, allow for future growth, keep distances traveled by students as short as possible, minimize the need for student transportation, and allow campuses to house students safely and provide adequate services to all students. And I think what's important about these is these are guidelines that we're using. There are situations based on where the students are and where the schools are that we're not going to be able to adhere to all of these equally. There's going to be, some scenarios where we may be able to keep students at their closest schools and others where we're not, just because of the sheer volume of students, the future growth, and those kinds of things. And so these are guidelines that we're using throughout this process. We also had decision principles. I don't want to, again, go through these verbatim, but you can absolutely go to the district website, look at the policy manual, and review this in more detail. I think it's very important to realize that, as Beth said, this is currently under review as far as considerations for implementation. And so, again, that concept of allowing flexibility for rising 5th graders and rising 8th graders, that's something that the board is very sensitive to. These are some of the considerations: welfare and health of students, financial considerations including operating costs, anticipated residential growth in the community. Okay, so now these are our current boundaries, and I want to just kind of take a couple minutes to go through the existing boundary map to kind of get you guys oriented. I know it's tough to see this. After I go through these options, it'll probably take me about 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to ask you to go out into the cafeteria 5 miles down the hall and look at, everything that you see here on the projector and these screens. I'm going to have the description kind of up here, and then we'll go through the maps on on the 2 side screens. But you'll have big boards out there where you can look at them, see detailed streets, and then provide your feedback based on those. And I'll be out there to talk to you personally, small groups. And Alex, you can't see him, he's hiding behind the curtain down here, but he helped develop all these too. And so we'll absolutely be there to kind of help you understand the considerations that went into developing the options. So here's our current attendance areas. Our elementary schools are the green squares in here, and so we've got Schiff up here, Sienna Crossing, Scanlon Oaks, Heritage Rose, and we have our elementary 48 and 15 sites down here. The shaded colored areas are the existing elementary boundaries, and so this rose color we have here is the existing Heritage Rose boundary. And so this is 6 up here, Sienna Parkway, LJ Parkway, and I believe Sienna Ranch down here. So what we have up here, this kind of drab brown color, this is the existing boundary for Schiff. And so it's Bees Creek in here. This is the Fort Bend Toll Road, Silver Ridge, and up here, this is the area, this kind of triangle area here. This all used to be Schiff before 2014. And that was the area that was zoned out of Schiff and into Heritage Rose. Next school down, this is Sienna Crossing in the purple here. We've got Steep Bank East and Steep Bank West. In the focus groups, what was kind of a wrench that we were trying to work through is because we know that we have a lot of our density in this area is up here, and each of these schools is going to be getting an addition: Schiff, Sienna Crossing, and Scanlon Oaks. But we really we knew that we were going to have to domino some students south to get to that capacity to elementary 48. And so one of our challenges that we talked through in the focus groups was that there is a walking path under Sienna Parkway for Steep Bank West to go to Sienna Crossing. And so it kind of made a roadblock from a domino effect, because we didn't want to move students that were walker eligible to Sienna Crossing into another school. And so that's a consideration that we had in that focus group discussion. In this kind of tan color down here, this is the current Scanlon Oaks boundary. Shipman's Landing over here is currently split. The northern part, just south of Steep Bank East, currently goes to Sienna Crossing, and then these 2 areas down here south go to Scanlon Oaks. The middle school boundaries are in this kind of outline color right here, this orange. And so you can see we've got a boundary right here for First Colony. So all the students that are north of Fort Bend Toll Road, proposed Fort Bend Toll Road, they currently feed to First Colony, and then they come back to Ridge Point for high school. And so that's one of those feeder splits that we're trying to see if we can fix with opening Middle School 15. The rest of, everything south of that area, everybody else goes to Baines. And of course, the purple line, thick purple lines we have here, that is the existing Ridge Point boundary. And at this time in this, this process, we're not looking at changing that boundary, but we are cognizant of the growth that's happening in Siena, and are absolutely have that on the radar for future consideration. So what's happening in this area? Elementary 48 in Siena South opens in 2017-18. Additions at Schiff, Siena Crossing, Scanlon Oaks come online in 17-18 as well. Middle School 15 in Siena South opens the following year, 2018-19. And we've got a commitment from the developer that we're going to have paved access from Middle School 15 to 521 by January of 2018. This is something that the board was very cognizant of, and it's a commitment. It is on schedule from the developer. All right, so these are kind of our utilization and enrollment and capacity tables that we'll be looking at throughout these options here. This is kind of our current really do nothing scenario, and this just shows our capacity at each facility. And so Heritage Rose has 988 students. Scanlon Oaks is currently 790 capacity. It gets an addition next year. The capacity goes up to 1030. Schiff goes from 742 to 982. Siena Crossing goes from 796 up to 1036. And Elementary 48 comes online next year as well. And so our current capacity in this area, elementary, is 3316, and it's going to go up by about 1,500 seats because we have those 3 additions coming online and the new elementary school at 48. Over here is our projected live-in enrollment. And so what these numbers are is these are the number of students, kindergarten through 5th grade, that reside in each of the boundaries and what they're projected to do per the PASA enrollment projections over the next 5 years. What we have over here is our utilization table. And so FC Local lays out some parameters for utilization. We consider a facility to be well utilized if it is utilized between 80 and 120% of its permanent capacity. These numbers that we have over here do not include any portables. And so when we're looking at our enrollment versus our capacity to get our utilization percentage, that's based on permanent space. And so if we look at Heritage Rose based on our current boundaries that we have here, and so we have some growth coming in from Siena South. We're 95% utilized at Heritage Rose now, and we're projected to go up to 175% by 2021-22. Scanlon Oaks is currently 124%. That addition comes online, and then now we're down to 93%, and pretty steady, high 80s, low 90s there. Schiff, with its current boundary, we're at 169% of permanent capacity. The addition comes online, we go down to 140%. So much breathing room, and then we're right back at 160%, by 2021-22. And so obviously this illustrates our need to adjust the Schiff boundary because there's just too many students in that area. Siena Crossing, 105%. Again, this is another school that is pretty much built out as far as the development goes. And so we're at 105% this year. The addition comes online, we're at 76%. And then, declining slightly based on housing turnover and those kinds of things. And so this really kind of shows our big picture story. We're at these 4 schools right now, and then 48 when it comes online. So right now we're at 121%. And then in aggregate, once we have all that capacity, we're down to 85%. And then in 5 years, we're right back up at 100. And so what this kind of shows us is that if we were able to balance the enrollment at all the schools equally, that's the best number we're going to get at with these schools. Now remember, just because the facility is over 100%, remember these are permanent capacity numbers only, and so Some schools have portables on them, and I don't believe that we're going to intend to leave any of the portables on the schools that are getting the additions. But just because a facility is over 100% doesn't mean that the class ratio is going up or anything like that, because we can have portables to keep that down. We look at middle schools, we're 114% between Baines and First Colony this year. Next year we go up to 117%. And then, again, this is based on our current boundaries, and so this does not account for any changes for 15, but you can see our aggregate utilization goes to 85%, 88, 91, 93. And so by adding that capacity online, we're much better off with that utilization. So again, this is our current scenario. If we're within policy FC local between 80 and 120%, we're going to be green over here. If we're over 120%, we're going to be red. If we're below 80%, we're going to be blue. And so as we go through the options, just kind of remember that. So here's our concept for elementary schools. And so again, here's our current shift boundary, remember in the brown. This area that we're outlining in purple. Actually, I'm going to start from the bottom because it'll make it easier to explain. And you guys can take pictures with your phones, but everything is going to be online. So this blue area down here is what we've defined as the boundary for elementary 48. And so this is the new development here that is just south of Ridge Point. These students are actually currently zoned to Heritage Rose because the boundary, this is the way the boundary was drawn in 2014, and we didn't know that this development was going to happen that quickly. And so these students would be zoned to elementary 48, along with the current Scanlon Oaks portion of Shipman's Landing, sorry. So that's our established boundary for elementary 48, and that's only projected to be 331 students the first year it opens, and so that's 39%. And I'll come back to that in a minute once we go through all these. Shipman's Landing, that's just south of Steep Bank East, would move into Scanlon Oaks. And so that's about 300, I believe it's about 300 students that would come out of Sienna Crossing and go into Scanlon Oaks. And so this is that kind of north to south push that we were talking about. So the current shift boundary, everybody that is south of the Fort Bend Toll Road would move to Sienna Crossing. So that is Bees Creek, Silver Ridge, and we took this, this is going to be the shark fin now. This is the apartment complex that only has access to Sienna Parkway that are currently zoned to Heritage Rose. And so in order to kind of clean up that transportation issue, we put them into Sienna Crossing as well. And so all we're left with at Schiff is everything that is north of the Fort Bend Toll Road and west of Sienna Parkway. And so at Schiff, we go from 1,256 students in the boundary down to 840. And so Schiff goes from 169% down to 86, 90, 91, 92, 93. And so this is a built out, pretty stable area that we have left at Schiff. Sienna Crossing, again, what we've done here is we've got to kind of domino students through Sienna Crossing to get them into that capacity that we have down here in this area. And so Sienna Crossing is going to stay pretty stable. We're at 105%, 103, 102, 103, 105, and so that's a pretty stable number there for Sienna Crossing. And again, elementary 48, I'm going to come back to it. This is a facility that, again, this proposed boundary has a lot of high growth area in it. One thing that we're looking at here is if you look at Heritage Rose, we still have a red number out here in the out year. We're 120% in 21-22. One of the considerations that we talked about was we know that we have a very high kind of bilingual population in Heritage Rose. And so our kind of rationale and thought process was maybe we could consider moving that program or part of that program into elementary 48 and start it there and really grow that program there to relieve some of this overutilization in the future. And remember, all these numbers that we're showing are based on live-in population, and programs are portable. And so that was kind of our consideration there. And that was our rationale for leaving elementary 48 kind of on the low side. So here's our corresponding middle school option. And so this is our kind of first colony fishtail that we have here. Again, this would happen in 2018-19 when middle school 15 opens. So all of these students that are currently Schiff first colony would go to Baines. And then what we've done here, and this is based on some feedback that we got from the focus group, is that when we developed our preliminary option, we wanted to kind of have clean feeders from the elementary to the middle schools. And there was a lot of feedback that, hey, let's do what we can to kind of keep the demographics between Baines and elementary and middle school 15 kind of as balanced as we can. And so what we ended up doing is we do have a feeder split at the middle school level here, and we split Scanlon Oaks and we split Heritage Rose. And so the portion of Scanlon Oaks that, everybody who is currently in Scanlon Oaks, remember this is our section of Shipman's Landing that we moved from Sienna Crossing into Scanlon Oaks. Those students would continue to go to Baines. Everybody else in Scanlon Oaks, west of Sienna Parkway, would go to elementary 15. And so that gives us about a 70% feed from Scanlon Oaks into middle school 15 and 30% to Baines. And then they all come back together at Ridge Point. What we did with Heritage Rose is we took everybody that is south of 6 and off of 521, they would feed into middle school 15, and everybody north of 6, off of north of 6, east of 521 over here, and off of 6 right here, they would feed into Baines. And so this is an area, this is an area that we moved 2 years ago, and so the idea was let's kind of leave them where they are for middle school, and so that was one of the advantages there as well. So that feeder split actually is closer to 50-50. We have about 45% that would feed into Baines and 55% would feed into middle school 15. But from a demographic standpoint and socioeconomics, we feel like Baines and middle school 15 would be pretty balanced in this scenario. And so now I'm going to go through some other considerations, and I'm going to leave these maps up here in this presentation. And so our neighborhood impacts, Alex, can you jump back to the elementary map for a second? So Bees Creek, Waterbrook West, and Waterbrook moved from Schiff to Sienna Crossing. Elysian Plantation, those are the apartments that I'm talking about, would move from Heritage Rose to Sienna. Shipman's Landing, currently zoned to Sienna, moves to Scanlon Oaks, and so that's the green area that we have right here. And then Sienna Village, it's Shipman's Landing, currently zoned to Scanlon Oaks, so that's this area down here. They would move to 48. Sienna Village of Destrehan, I think I'm saying that right, directly south of Ridge Point, moves from Heritage Rose to elementary 48. So our feeder implications that we have, Schiff would no longer feed into First Colony. Schiff and Sienna Crossing will feed 100% into Baines. Elementary 48 will feed 100% into middle school 15. Scanlon Oaks will split between middle school 15, so 70%, which is Waters Lake, and 30% to Baines, which is that Shipman's Landing piece. Heritage Rose will split between middle school 15, again 55% south of, next map, Alex. So Heritage Rose south of 6 is going to feed to middle school 15, and north of 6 is going to feed to Baines. So again, that's 55% to middle school 15, 45% to Baines. And again, our major benefits there are the balance in the demographics. So that's what we've got as far as the scenarios that we want to collect feedback on. And so at this time, I just kind of want to go through just our process here. We have large boards. I think we have 3 different sets for you guys to kind of congregate around and talk about, try to find your street on. to provide feedback. We have paper questionnaires out there. The first question is which area you're providing feedback on. And so make sure that you select elementary 48 and middle school 15 on that first question. And then we want to know how you feel about this proposal. And then there's an open-ended section for comments. And so we want to know if there are certain portions of these concepts that you don't like, tell us. And again, I just want to be very clear on this. Your feedback will be considered as we move forward on this. This is a very important part of the process. All materials that you see here will be posted on the website tonight or first thing in the morning. And again, that online questionnaire is already up there. If you want to scan the QR code and take it on your phone versus writing things down on paper, I don't know if you guys are texting like teenagers or not, so it's up to you. But I will be wandering around the cafeteria to answer your questions or anything that you guys want to know about this process. Alex will be as well. And so at this point, Beth, do you have anything you want to add?
I do. I have 3 things I want to say. So when you give your feedback, please be very specific in your feedback. I'm going to copy what you said last night, Scott, in that if you just say, I don't like it, that doesn't give us specific feedback to work with, or I don't want to move, my kids don't want to move. I mean, tell us, really give us that feedback and rationale for why, so that we will have some considerations to take into account. And the reason for the questionnaires being so very important, as I mentioned earlier, is to give us information to share with the community in terms of FAQs, to make sure that secondly, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. Not everyone is comfortable asking questions or giving feedback in an open forum setting or publicly on a microphone. And so this is the best avenue for us to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share your feedback. So please take advantage of that as well. As Scott said, this information is going to be posted on the district website along with the video. So please encourage your friends and neighbors in the area who may not have been able to attend this evening to go online. I wouldn't say first thing in the morning because we have to coordinate with the videographer and make sure that everything's there in terms of the presentation, but you will have access to the maps at a close-up range and the presentation as well as the video and the questionnaire. The questionnaire will remain open through Friday, December the 9th. But again, remember that even after that, if you have feedbacks or comments or questions that you would like for us to consider, you can use that Let's Talk attendance boundary link, and that information will come straight to our office. So again, thank you for being here this evening. We're going to load up and exercise for a little moment in time down the hallway, and we look forward to the interactions in the cafeteria.
Real quick, I just want to add one more thing. Again, if you see these, and we should have said this last night, and you're not impacted, please hang around because as a district administration and as a board of trustees, we need to do what's best for all students. And if you can provide kind of that objective point of view, what's best for everybody in the district, we absolutely want to see that feedback. And so I encourage you, if you're not impacted, we still absolutely want your feedback. Thank you.